we talk about the mind, the body, and the relationship. Hi, my name is Emerald Hill, and this is Dr. Laurie Ponsford-Hill, and today we're talking about
narcissism!
Yeah!
Aww.
We've all met a narcissist.
Well, you know, what's very interesting about narcissism, actually, really, is the truth of the matter is that we all have to actually really have the ability to self-love.
That's true.
That's so true, right? So, I mean, as much as it is that we use it as a pejorative term, a negative term, the truth of the matter is that we all need to be able to care for ourselves, meaning we need to be able to love ourselves in order to care for ourselves.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you think of when you think of narcissism?
I think of people who aren't accountable for their actions because they're just so good, they're untouchable, they're above everybody else. They frequently, think of themselves as extremely attractive, either physically or personality-wise. Like their flaws are diminished somehow because, they're, the good aspects of them just overpower whatever flaws they could possibly have,
Oh, so true, so true. I think of people who are high on themselves.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
It's all about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the term narcissist actually really came from Greek mythology. And we think of that as Narcissus.
Yes.
Right. And so Narcissus actually really was walking along, saw a pool of water, and started to look in the pool of water and saw himself. And when he saw himself, he fell in love with himself. And he wanted so desperately to have himself. And in order to be able to do that, he killed himself because there was no way to attain his object of desire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's self-love to the nth degree.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think, actually really when I think about it, I think about animals, how it is they imprint on their moms. They follow their mom around, right? They love their mom, right? Because they've imprinted on their mom. He imprinted on himself, and it is he looked at himself.
Yeah.
Yes, followed himself right into the water. So, narcissism has a lot to do with parenting.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Everything has something to do with parenting, right? Because when it is that children are young, their responsiveness in regards to mom and mom's responsiveness in regards to their baby is actually really teaching empathy.
Right.
Right? And if you don't learn empathy, well, then you can never be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to sort of estimate or guess how it is that the other might be feeling.
Right.
And then deal with them accordingly. No, it actually really turns into me, all about me, right? So parents need to teach their children frustration tolerance, right?
Right.
So when it is the child is frustrated, when you give them what it is that they're wanting, what happens?
They don't learn.
They absolutely don't learn. Yeah. And we have the new therapy puppies, right? Ebony and Ivory, and that's exactly what it is that you're teaching them.
Yeah, so frustration tolerance is basically the amount of time you can go without getting frustrated or showing frustration, at least. And so what we do with the puppies is that they have to stay in their section of the house, or else they'll pee everywhere else. Or at least we want them to pee in that section of the house so we at least know where it is, right? So they get frustrated, with the time that they don't get to be in the same room with us. So a really great way to practice their frustration tolerance is to leave for 30 seconds, come back, give them a treat, leave for a minute, come back, give them a treat, leave for a minute, 30, come back, give them a treat. Very much like anything, like with people or with exercising or with food or whatever, you can force yourself to work on your frustration tolerance by saying, just do it for another 30 seconds, and then the next time, another 30 seconds more.
That's true, exactly. And also, too, when it is that they're put in their crate, they cry, right? With barking, howling, that sort of thing. But if you run to them, then it teaches them when they bark and howl, that's what it is that's going to happen. You're going to run to them, you're going to let them out. But frustration tolerance, to build that up, to realize, oh, I actually have to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And then you'll actually come and let me out when things are good.
I have to be quiet. That makes sense.
Very good. So the one thing about narcissism is to do with the sense of entitlement. And we hear that a lot today.
Mm-hmm.
People are entitled,
Yeah.
right? They deserve to have this or be treated this way or whatever that might be.
Which is very interesting because I remember growing up, like meeting someone who was entitled, and I would bring my story home to you and be like, oh, well, I think that person might be entitled, but now it's a more common, way more common, I find, with people. You go out anywhere, it's like, well, there's 2 of them, well, there's 4 of them over there. You know what I mean? Well, it's amazing, especially when you go to high school, because it's like, who gets to do all the group work? Well, that's not the entitled person. There's like 6 groups.
Oh dear, that's so funny. So how do you know when somebody is entitled?
Well, typically, like when you're dealing with them, they find it's all about me. They do a lot of I want statements and things like that. And if you try to reason, there's no reasoning. It's the law. I want what I want when I want it. And it's really hard for them to wrap their mind around the thought that maybe what I want isn't what's important. Or maybe what I want isn't as important as what that person wants.
Oh, exactly, right? And talking about working in groups, right? Everybody pays attention to one another, that you show up even when it is that it, is inconvenient or whatever, because the group is actually really what's most important. Or the organization or whomever it is that you're working with, right? But those that are entitled don't actually really think that way. It's more competition in the environment, right? I don't have to show up because I didn't have to do that, right? Yeah. You have to show up because you have to do that. Next thing you know, the entire system has fallen apart because nobody's actually really taking responsibility or supporting one another.
It's actually amazing when you think about the thought process that they have. Like, I remember when I was doing stand-up, and there was 10 of us doing these stand-up shows, and one of them was like, oh, I'm not going to perform tonight because I want to hang out with my girlfriend. And we were all like, okay, but now there's a 5-minute slot that we need to fill. Like, you said that you're going to dedicate yourself to this. You want to be a famous comedian. You want to work on yourself. And his answer was, no, you need to work on yourself. I'm fine.
He's fine right out of the biz.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is the difference between a narcissist and a sociopath?
Well, the difference is narcissists have the capability of feeling for other people. Maybe it's just a muscle that they haven't exercised, but it is possible. And if a narcissist recognizes, wait a minute, this is causing a lot of problems for me in a relationship that I'm having, either with my family or friends or romantic, then they can go into therapy and say, I need help with this, and then work on lowering their narcissism. But a sociopath or a psychopath is basically like, it's very difficult, if impossible, to change. And that's what a malignant narcissist is where it's like you're almost a sociopath, and it's probably that you're not going to change. Because, narcissists, they have to want to change, or else they're not going to do it.
Well, so true. They have to be able to get something out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because they're getting something out of putting themselves first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
So they have to want the relationship. They have to want to develop themselves or be better in the workplace or whatever that might be, because they realize that they're eroding something, perhaps, right? So, but when you get to the end of the spectrum where it's malignant, there is nothing outside of themselves. And so what would be the motivation in order to be able to change that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think from like looking on the outside in, I don't think I'm a narcissist, but I know that when I do work with narcissists, it's very like you have to be so clean cut for them to want. It can't be like, oh well, if we reason with you, it has to be like so just like cut the cheese. Like either you stop acting that way or you're gone. And it's such a hard way to be because it's like if you're not the employer, you know, then it's like if you don't stop acting that way, then I'm gone, you know, and you have to be happy and content with that.
You know what? That is really so true, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that's a very tough position to be in, especially when it is that you're in the workplace because it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
Right? And so if the person actually really has no boundaries at all,
Yeah.
right, then they don't know when to stop. And then they just keep coming.
Yeah.
Right? And boundaries are the way in which we organize society.
Yeah.
And when people don't have any boundaries, then, you know, not even the authorities can keep people in check. So basically, really what we're talking about is we're talking about an attachment issue. Mm-hmm. And when a narcissist comes into therapy, they're actually really wanting, if they're wanting to be reparented. Right? So then it's formulating that attachment only in a healthy and appropriate way.
Yeah.
So that's long-term therapy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, isn't there that thing that you say where it's like, I'm just comparing, but if you have like a 12-year-old step kid, then you need to be in that kid's life for 12 years before they recognize you as a parent? Yeah.
Exactly. It takes as long as how old they are when you enter into the relationship. Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, speaking of how it is that you have to be very cut and dried, right? Maintaining the boundaries at all times.
Yeah.
And it can take a lot of effort and energy to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, for sure, especially if there isn't the emotional investment, because if you have a child, then it's like, yeah, you know what, I can sit here and listen to that kid in the bedroom cry when I told them no, because that's my parental obligation. But when you have somebody in who's like, I'm a narcissist, and I'm going to put you all, you know, through this strife, and you have to hold your ground. It can be very difficult for therapists to feel like they want to do that.
It takes a special type of therapist to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So the one thing a narcissist knows very well how to do is conflict. And I mean, when you think about that, right, it's all about me. And so then when it is that the other person, the partner, the child, whomever it is that might be, starts to talk about them, there's not going to be any kind of connection there whatsoever, because that's not really what matters. And so when you think about that, in regards to conflict, people can actually really do conflict as well to the nth degree, right? Meltdowns, outbursts, anger can get actually really to abuse. And as we were talking about gaslighting, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, I did that. No, you didn't. How dare you?
Yeah.
Right? Because there again is that attachment issue. So it can be very, very difficult to be in relationship with a narcissist in order to be able to work with them to see a different way.
Right. And it can happen in the relationship between the narcissist and the therapist too. Like, how many times it's like, oh, well, maybe, you know, it's really good for you to think about it in this light. Oh, well, I didn't know that, you know, we were going to go through stupid ideas like that. Well, it's really good for the therapist, like you said, like street parenting, to check it. Like, do not say what I'm saying is stupid. You're the one that came here to see me. This is what my valuable opinion is. So you have to, like, keep checking it. And it's so exhausting because it's just like, how many times can you hear someone degrade what the advice is you're giving them, you know?
So true. Yeah, so it's really important to be able to, just like what we were talking about in regards to therapy puppies, right? Puppies learn by chewing.
Yeah.
right? They bite, right? And then they learn how hard to bite. And so when it is that they bite and it hurts, it's really important to be able to say, ouch,
Yeah.
right? So that they learn those things hurt.
Yeah.
Well, just the same with narcissists. When it is that they say what it is that they say, to be able to say just that, ouch, right? You've overstepped a boundary.
Yeah.
Or else they won't know. How would they know?
No. Yeah, that's a really good point, because especially with the biting thing, it's like a lot of people, what they go to is just immediately going like this, you know? But when you actually verbalize it, you know, it's like you're allowing that person to have a second to apologize or think about it, you know?
Learning how to listen. Yeah, and so what you were talking about is a person who constantly corrects. Because they believe that they have more information than you, they know more than you, of course, right? That might, you know, whatever it is that might be, and so constantly correcting. And so it's really good to be able to start to identify these patterns of behavior, right? Again, to do with those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting, actually, because it's like, I don't know, it's just such an interesting social thing, you know? Like, how do you know when someone's being a narcissist or that's like their sense of humor? I met someone whose sense of humor was to constantly correct you, whether it was just like very minor grammatical errors in your speech or something, and it's just like, okay, we get it.
Enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So the difficulty is that when it is that you allow really too much space. So what happens when somebody has trouble, a problem, whatever that might be, and you start walking around that because you want to ignore it, avoid it, whatever that might be, then you think about the size of a room, really, eventually, the problem becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're now hugging the wall as you're walking around the issue. So it is really important to have the confidence to be able to, in essence, stand up for yourself, right? Not to keep backing up until it is that you hit the wall. And unfortunately, what has a tendency to happen is that narcissists prey on people who have lower self-esteem.
Yeah.
And so when a person has low self-esteem, the other person then has much higher self-esteem than them. Narcissists have very, very high self-esteem. And so the person that has low self-esteem starts to feel smaller and smaller and small, which allows a narcissist to feel bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really important not to back up, but to confront, not in an aggressive way, right? But in an assertive manner.
Yeah.
Just
a really great example, actually, is when I was in college and there was this narcissist at my house, and he took an egg out of my fridge and then dropped it on my patio.
wow.
Broke on my patio, and I was like, are you going to clean that egg up? And he was like, Emerald, we both know you're going to clean it up.
Oh.
And then he never came back to my house again, because I told him, I said, if that egg isn't cleaned up, you're never welcome in my house again. He was like, okay. And then he didn't clean it up, and I never welcomed him back.
Wow.
And he was shocked. But the bottom line is, if you want to come with your own eggs and drop them on my patio, then that's one thing.
Wow.
Because, you know what I mean? Like, just like, don't allow it, you know? If I played the victim and like started to get upset, and then he like just kept coming back to my house, he would have just kept ruining my house, you know?
Well, there you go, right? That's maintaining the boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's very hard because when you think about that, that is a person you could actually really afford to lose.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you were married to him, you might not do so well when he wakes up in the morning.
That's a really good point. Like, I'm really lucky because I'm not in a relationship with these people. But what do you do when you're married to that person?
Exactly. Well, I think what happens in relationship when it's significant relationship is that you actually really have to start outlining what it is that the boundaries are.
Yeah.
You know, so, and that's a really hard process to go through.
Yeah.
You know, and maintaining those boundaries at all times. Calling the other person on what it is that they're presenting, and not falling for it.
Yeah. I think what's really important is you have to look at it in the eyes of quality of life. You know, like you have to take yourself into consideration. What I really like to do is when I'm in a bad situation, I like to think about it like my friend is telling it to me. I always get so upset when people tell me how stressed they are or how like scared they are, and then I'm like, oh, well, do these clean cut things to help yourself. And so I do that for myself because it's like, you know, if you don't have good quality of life and with that person and they're not willing to change, then what's the point?
Well, there you go. Well, and I think there's certain circumstances, especially when it is that you have a parent who is a narcissist, right? And you are a child.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, right? Because you look up to your parents and you think of them as, you know, perfect, important, caring, you know, all that kind of stuff. When it is eventually realized, because when it is we enter our teenage years, right, we start to incorporate the good, the bad, and the ugly into whom our parents are. And to realize that the reality is that people use tactics in order to get what it is that they want, and that's what it is that narcissists actually really do. They use those tactics very, very well.
Yeah.
And once the child is old enough to be able to recognize it, these are tactics, then therefore not to fall for the tactics, but just to recognize them, right? And then deal with them accordingly, which can be a lifelong process.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say kids, because I think a lot of people's minds go, oh, like 13 or 14-year-olds, but that's not true. Like kids who are like 5 and up can recognize, like, that's not right.
That's right, exactly.
That's not fair, that's not right for me, like, I don't understand. You know, kids are smart and they get what's right and wrong.
And, you know, adult children dealing with their parents, right, who are using these tactics and then wondering, well, how come it is that I'm involved in this? It's because the boundaries were not set, right? And if you keep playing into the tactics without recognizing, oh, that's actually a tactic, right?
Yeah.
And then setting the boundary.
Yeah.
Got it, right? You're calling me all the time while it is that I'm at work, crying about this and that and wanting me to do things. And then my question is, how come you're picking up the phone?
Yeah.
Right? Setting the boundary and saying, you know what? I'll talk to you at this time during the day, right? And you can leave as many messages as you would like to, right? And then I will talk to you at this time, and then to follow through on it.
Yeah.
Right? And not listen to those messages over and over and over again. Erase them.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know what they're about. Those are the tactics.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think what's really frustrating, and I think what the hardest thing that people try to deal with is like when they use the tactic, well, I'm gonna kill myself. And it's so hard, like it's such an emotional wrench.
That's right, Narcissists, right? I can't get what it is that I'm wanting, and so that's my answer.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm in so much pain. But the truth of the matter is, it's really good just to recognize it as a tactic.
Yeah.
And to follow through, because the truth is we all have a duty to report. It does not land on our shoulders that's when it is that we need to get the authorities involved to say, this is what it is this person has said, and so please follow through on that. And yes, the person's going to be angry at you. Of course, they're going to use all of those, again, tactics of anger and outbursts and all of those things. But the truth of the matter is, it takes it off your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then they learn. You don't fall for that tactic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's kind of nice to see a narcissist's face when they're confronted with the police, because they're like, wait a minute, there's consequences to my actions?
Well, there you go. There's limits.
Yeah. Right?
As we talked about earlier, narcissists don't realize that there's actually really limits to how it is we do society. Yeah. Right? So, really good. Start to be, if you are in a relationship with a narcissist, just to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be assertive, calling the police to say, hey, this person has said this, I need you to check that out, is not aggressive. It's actually assertive behavior, right? So good to start to think about that. How am I assertive in the way in which I do life? Who is it that's in my sphere that uses tactics, right? And so then to start to pay attention to, well, what are the boundaries that I need to set up, right? Because it's just as much about you as it is about them. Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Emerald, to talk about narcissism today.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Thank you for talking to me about it too.
So if you have a narcissist in your life, really good to start to think about, how can I learn how to deal with that accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, stay subscribed, drop a comment, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye. Hi there, welcome back. Do you want to take your mask off?
Oh, I didn't know I had it on.